Hello viewers, I'm Maksymilian Skrzypczak from Układ Sił, Balance of Power, and today I'm pleased to be joined by former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, the man who fought one of the first wars in Gaza, but also the war against Hezbollah in Lebanon, who ordered the construction of the Iron Dome, and right now is one of the most outspoken critics of the Israeli war effort in Gaza. Hello, Prime Minister.
Hello, hi.
We will talk about the war in Gaza from strategic and also from a moral point of view, but then we'll jump onto political landscape. We'll talk about the so-called day after and also broader peace considerations.
Subskrybuj nasz kanał. Znajdziesz tu wiele ciekawych audycji, wnikliwych komentarzy i wywiadów z najlepszymi polskimi oraz zagranicznymi ekspertami.
Prime Minister, first let me begin by asking about your criticism of the current war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. Interestingly, you're one of the most popular, most outspoken critics of the handling of the conflict by the current Netanyahu government, and yet you are not some kind of left-wing peace activist. You're actually a proud Israeli Jew. So, what exactly makes you criticize the current actions of Netanyahu so much?
Well, in order to put things in the right perspective, I should say that I was entirely in favor of the war when it started on the 8th of October and subsequently for a very long time. I supported the military effort. I was fully aware of the fact that a war against Hamas in Gaza will require a very painful price for lots of people that live in the densely populated area of Gaza. You can't fight Hamas inside Gaza while Hamas is hiding on ground and underground, in hospitals, in public facilities, in the mosques, in the schools, in private houses. If you want to reach out for Hamas, unfortunately, there will be also civilians that are not involved in terror that will be killed. And in spite of this, at that time, I thought that it was inevitable and unavoidable, and I supported the military effort, and I certainly thought that it must be done. However, now we are not on the 8th of October 2023, we are almost on the 8th of October 2025. And Israel was fighting against Hamas for 2 years. And we had very significant achievements, which I am entirely in support of. We eliminated most of the leadership of Hamas, including Yahya Sinwar and Muhammad Def and Ismail Haniyeh and Muhammad Sinwar, and all the high-ranking and the middle-ranking command of the Hamas, and that was inevitable. More than 60,000 Palestinians were killed in Gaza, and many of them were Hamas, and they deserved the punishment because Hamas perpetrated the atrocities against Israel. They started the war on the 7th of October. They killed innocent civilians. They killed people in their homes, in the living rooms, in the bedrooms, in the safe rooms. They killed children. They killed their parents. They killed their grandparents. Israel had to fight back, and we fought back. After 2 years, we can say that we have more or less destroyed Hamas. And today, the question is, why should we expand the war? Not why should we, or did we have to fight originally? Originally, it was all right. Now, 2 years afterwards, you have to ask yourself, what are we going to achieve in continuing the war now? And the Prime Minister doesn't say, and the government doesn't say, and no one knows. And all of the former commanders of the Israeli army, including all of the chief of staff of the army that are still alive, all the senior generals of Israel, all of the commanders of Hamas, of Mossad, all of the commanders of the security services, the warriors of the historic warriors of the state of Israel, they all say there is not any objective to the war which justifies the cost of making this war now, I emphasize now, to lose Israeli soldiers, to lose the hostages, to kill so many Palestinians that are not involved in terror, and for no objective that can justify it, it's a crime. And that's why I'm against it now. I'm not alone, by the way. The majority Israelis are against it. All the former commanders of the Israeli army, all the generals, all the pilots of the Israeli Air Force that are not serving now on a regular basis, they are all against continuing the war.
All right, Prime Minister, you mentioned that you consider the continuation of the war in Gaza to be a crime, in spite of the fact that at the beginning you thought it was a just response to the terror attack
Absolutely.
of Hamas. Now, I would like to first touch upon the allegations of war crimes. Would you agree with those who accuse Israel of widespread war crimes in Gaza?
There is not a policy of war crimes. So I can't agree that there is a policy that is guideline by the government or by the highest command of the army to kill Palestinians indefinitely, regardless of whether they are fighters of Hamas or they are not fighters, whether they are involved in terror or not involved in terror. There is not such a policy, okay? And I never said that there was a policy of war crimes. I say that war crimes are committed when there is no reason for a war, when there is no legitimacy for a war, when the chief of staff of the Israeli army says that the war is a death trap and he is against expanding the war, and if in spite of this, the prime minister and the government continues the military operations at the cost of lives of Israeli soldiers, at the cost of life of the hostages, as the cost of lives of thousands of non-involved Palestinians, this is a crime, this is a war crime, and it has to stop right away.
All right, but let me just challenge this point when you say there's no policy of war crimes. I mean, as we know, war crimes, they can be isolated incident on the battlefield when a commander or a sergeant just is angry and starts shooting at civilians. But the thing is that many people in the West believe, and let me say, there is perhaps some reasons to believe that. I mean, there can be made an argument that some of Israeli actions, which can be considered war crimes, might be not bottom up, but top down. If you look at, for instance, the involvement of Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich in the current government, they hold a lot of power. Arguably, they hold Prime Minister Netanyahu hostage to their will. And at the same time, they openly talk about holding all the aid from coming to Gaza and also encouraging so-called voluntary expulsion, voluntary immigration from Gaza. And if you combine that with strikes against humanitarian organizations, against civilian infrastructure, some could make an argument that their goal is to make Gaza unlivable in order to perpetrate the crime of ethnic cleansing. What would be your answer to that?
Look, my answer is that I'll be the last person on earth to defend Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. As far as I'm concerned, they are terrorists. And indeed, the fact that they make these statements, advocating, continuing and expanding the military operation, actually forcing and deporting all of the Palestinians living in Gaza into the south part of it and perhaps outside of Gaza altogether, all these statements, and particularly the fact that they are not just outsiders or a retired political person like myself, They are holding the most important positions in the cabinet now, and it is obvious to everyone that if their policies will not be perpetrated, will not be accomplished, they will retire from the government and they will bring down the government. So all this is part of the perception that is interpreted by the international community to be a policy of war crimes. But the fact is, I don't want to argue about it because I agree that continuing the war is a crime. What I may not agree with is that at the actual command that the government gives, there is not any purpose of killing indefinitely people in a manner which is, in legal terms, is defined as a war crime. But there is no question in my mind that on a regular basis, in occasional confrontations, sometimes a commander in one area or a soldier in another area are doing things which can be easily defined and interpreted as war crimes. What I am saying is that it is not a policy, but unfortunately with ministers like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, it is very difficult to argue against the perceptions that this is the policy.
All right, that's a fair answer. Thank you. Now switching more to the strategic landscape. One could ask, all right, Prime Minister Olmert, you criticized the current war, but what should Israel do now? Should it accept a ceasefire, effectively leaving Hamas in power in Gaza?
Look, I've been interviewed over the last couple of years, maybe more than 1,000 times, okay, to all the international media, not just to the Israelis, in every corner of the world. And one of the most difficult parts of my interviews was when I was asked how I can interpret and analyze Netanyahu. I don't want to analyze him. I don't support him. I am absolutely 100% against him and against his policies. Now, the question is, how can you seriously argue that you want to change the situation if you leave Hamas in Gaza? What is the Hamas that is left in Gaza? Did you ask yourself? Is this the Hamas of the 7th of October? Or is this Hamas without Yahya Sinwar, without Muhammad Def, without Ismail Haniyeh, without all of the highest command and the lower ranked command, without the 60,000 people, most of the soldiers of Hamas were eliminated, without the command position, without the rockets, without the launchers, without the tunnels. So to say that if Hamas is left today in Gaza, this is the same imminent danger to the security, to the stability, to the war against terror, this is ridiculous. This is a broken Hamas, a Hamas which has practically been eradicated, Hamas which has been left without most of his weapons, most of his financial sources, most of his commanders, most of his soldiers, most of his tunnels, most of his rockets. This Hamas is not anymore a danger that Israel can't live with. And therefore, the attempt to relate to the Hamas that was on the 7th of October is to entirely ignore what we have been doing in the last 2 years fighting Hamas.
All right, but considering that Hamas perhaps will try, if a ceasefire is reached, of course, to rebuild itself over the course of the next years or even a decade, would you say that it would be reasonable to reach a ceasefire and, for instance, then do something like support anti-Hamas Palestinians in Gaza, such as the militia of Abu Shabab, which is openly hostile to Hamas, or perhaps try to bring the Palestinian Authority into the Gaza Strip?
Look, I think that Hamas as an idea is not something that you can eradicate or you can destroy. You can destroy the fighting units, the military power, the political organization. I think we did it effectively for a very long time now, and I think that we are in an entirely different situation. When I was prime minister, I articulated together with the then president of France, Jacques Chirac, the three principles that, with reference to Hamas. We said that Hamas will be recognized if A, Hamas will declare that it stops completely, commits itself to stop completely any involvement in terror. Number two, that Hamas recognizes the right of Israel to exist. And three, that Hamas recognizes all the agreements that were signed between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. So if Hamas will respond to these three principles, then Hamas can become part of a new government in Gaza. What I think that in the meantime should happen is that if Israel will pull out from Gaza, there should be an interim security force made of Palestinians and of soldiers from moderate Arab countries, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, perhaps North African countries, that will take over the military control of Gaza and that will make sure that Hamas is not being again in a position to have any military threat of consequence that should worry all of us. Now, what will happen if in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, there will be a change? I don't know to say and to anticipate what will happen in 15 years. I say that considering the devastation of Gaza and the devastation of Hamas that was accomplished by the military operation of Israel, it will take many, many, many years for something to build again any military threat. And if there will be a military threat, Israel will not be sleeping when they will try to make an attack. And nothing of the nature of the 7th of October will ever happen again. But if we will decide to sleep again, if we will decide to ignore the dangers, if we will decide to have an overconfidence, unnecessary overconfidence, things can happen. But listen, it's not necessary. And the fact that we failed on the 7th of October can't be a paradigm according to which to assess the future.
All right, that's interesting what you mentioned about the interim government formed by some Palestinian fractions and also some Arab states. Now,
Yeah, but under the approval of the Palestinian Authority.
all right, so in your concept, the Palestinian Authority would be the central body there, right?
This authority will be the framework, the political legitimacy, which is essential because according to the agreements that Israel signed with the Palestinian Authority, there is only one body that represents all of the Palestinian community, and this is the Palestinian Authority. However, I think that the administration, which has to be appointed by the Palestinian Authority to govern Gaza, will have to have independent executive powers so that they will not depend on the inefficiency of the Palestinian Authority as this is manifested in the West Bank, that it will become a very effective governing body that will take over from Hamas the day-to-day reconstruction of Gaza.
Yes, so now we have a more clear picture. Would you say that such a takeover of Gaza Strip by such a government could be a first step on the long road towards peace? For instance, by de-radicalization of Gaza, rebuilding of Gaza independent of Hamas or other violent groups, and also making sure that the new generations in Gaza are in education, but also in their religious upbringing, um, you know, um, cultivated without the terrorist incitement, but more with the rational and patriotic, but still peaceful mindset of Palestinian identity.
Look, I have published a joint statement with the former foreign minister of the Palestinian Authority, and the former ambassador to the United Nations of the Palestinian Authority, by the way, the nephew of Yasser Arafat, Dr. Nasser al-Qudwa. I published with him a joint statement signed by both of us, in which we call for the end of the war in Gaza and for the beginning of a dialogue between Israel and the Palestinian Authority towards a two-state solution. And this is something which is now public everywhere. We have passed this resolution I passed it also to the Polish government, and it is in the hands of every single foreign office in Europe and in the Arab world. This is in my mind, the only possible way to change the realities. I mean, obviously, you are interested in what is the strategic plan, or should be the strategic plan, or may have been in the mind of the Israeli government when we are fighting in Gaza. What is our horizon for the next day, for the next phase? I mean, what do we want? And I keep saying all the time, let's assume that we kill all the Palestinian fighters, all the Hamas. Everyone that holds a gun will be eliminated. Everyone that holds a hand grenade will be eliminated. Everyone that holds an RPG will be eliminated. No more. No Hamas fighting. Not at all. There are still 2.2 million people living there. And there are 3.5 million people living in the West Bank. We have to give an answer. What do we propose as a political horizon for the 5.5 million Palestinians after we will have defeated them in the war, after we will have destroyed every single terrorist cell in the West Bank and in Gaza? What is the next phase? This is what we need to offer. And my offer has been, while I was prime minister, and I presented it to Abu Mazen, and unfortunately he didn't have the courage to sign. And I keep offering it now with the former foreign minister of the Palestinian Authority. End of the war in Gaza, return all the hostages, release Palestinian prisoners as part of an agreement, building an interim security force made of Palestinians and moderate Arab soldiers from moderate Arab countries, soldiers from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, from the Emirates, from Jordan, perhaps from other Muslim countries, that will take over the military control of Gaza and will establish the provisional government until elections will take place both in Gaza and in the West Bank. In the meantime, Israel has to start a political process of negotiations with the Palestinians toward a two-state solution. If we will only start this process, then we will be able to build up a much more comprehensive strategic move, which is the beginning of normalization with Saudi Arabia. So there is an alternative which can change the world, which can change the Middle East, which can make the lives different completely to the Palestinians and to the Israelis and to all the other nations. It's in the hands of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Unfortunately, he is not inclined to do any of these things because he's captive, as you said, correctly, of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. And it's also in the hands of Donald J. Trump. And Donald J. Trump is the only person in the world that can dictate to Bibi what needs to be done. He doesn't have to ask Bibi's permission. He doesn't have to be bothered by whether Bibi likes it or not. He has to give him an order. And Bibi Netanyahu have no choice but to obey to the orders of Trump, because he has got no one in the world that will listen to him anymore, except maybe of your president in Poland and the prime minister of Hungary. But this is not enough. When all of Europe, all of the Western Europe, all of the EU, all of them are against the policies of government of the government of Israel. So this is my strategy. This should be the strategy of the government. This should establish the first basis for a dramatic change that can make lives suddenly more promising for millions of Palestinians and Israelis.
I very much agree. However, I see one obstacle here. And I believe this is the problem that also derailed the Oslo process in the 90s and the 2000s. Namely, in the West, and I see this mentality also in, Israel, Palestine, we very often focus on the technical solution. We jump to how the ultimate settlement would look like. And we sometimes have this thinking that if only we offer the correct solution to borders, to settlements, to Jerusalem, then both sides will just accept this. But the problem is that the obstacle to peace is not necessarily that much on the ground as it is in the minds of people. Because the technical solution ultimately can be figured out. But first, there needs to be some, I don't know if you agree, but some baseline de-radicalization of both societies. There has to be some basic reconciliation. And also, I made an interview with a colleague of Nasr al-Kidwa, Samer Sinjilawi, 2 months ago, and he also mentioned a new narrative between both peoples and also change in leadership. And all those things, but especially the reconciliation part, which can make people think more clearly and in more practical terms, those things have to take time. And if we jump straight away to the solution making, it will be very likely derailed by radicals on both sides. So, what would you say are the correct moves to move forward towards the two-state solution, but without just jumping straight to it and risking that the entire process will fall apart in the process?
I agree with Dr. Nasser Al-Kidwa and with Samer Sinjawi, and they think like me. Now, I want to tell you this. I'm sick and tired of listening, why not? There are all times, people that doesn't have the conviction, doesn't have the fire in their chest. They don't have the energy and the enthusiasm and the commitment to carry on and to move forward fast. I'll tell you something. Had someone told now talking with me, had similar things were said in 1945, 46, 48, that the day will come that France and Germany will be the best friends in Europe, that Germany and the United Kingdom will cooperate intimately and intensely. How would you respond to that? You can't start with technical border arrangements, political arrangements, once you don't change the minds of people. The minds of people changed once you have established the necessary technical framework and outlined the principles, and then you start to build up a horizon that people can believe in. Then it takes time. Of course, it will take a lot of time. But had someone told you 50 years ago that Europe will be united as it is today, in spite of all the historical rivalries between the different European countries, which were more intense and more deep and more bloody than the interactions that were between Jews and the Palestinians, maybe you would have said the same. Listen, we have to believe, we have to move forward, we have to establish the necessary technical, logistical, border, political, diplomatic frameworks in order to put things in the right perspective. And of course, we have to create a reality of life that will support it. And it will take time, but we have to start somewhere. And if it will not start, it will not happen.
All right, that's a great answer. Thank you for that explanation. Now, lastly, I would like to ask about the divisions within Israeli society as my last question. Very recently, I was listening to an interview with Ari Shavid, one of my favorite Israeli journalists, also the famous author of the book My Promised Land, The Triumph and Tragedy of Israel. A great book by someone who is, on one hand, a devoted Zionist, but also who is critical of many things that are happening within Israel and also in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, Shavid mentioned his concern that perhaps the biggest threat to Israel doesn't come from its enemies, but from Israel itself, from the division inside Israel, from perhaps unfavorable demographics, where the Arab population and the Haredim are increasingly taking power of the percentage of the population, and also the lunatic policy of the government of Israel creating enemies everywhere. And he quoted a powerful phrase by David Ben-Gurion, one of the founders of the modern state of Israel, who claimed that the Jews are a wonderful nation, they are the most capable nation on earth, but among all the things that they have, there's also, unfortunately, the deeply entrenched gene of self-destruction. What's your take on that? As a Jew and as an Israeli, do you have more hope or more fear looking in the future?
I have enormous admiration, obviously, for the vision of Ben-Gurion, who was the founding father of the State of Israel. This is a façon de parler. This is a kind of a statement saying that the Jews have a gene of self-destruction. It's true that we have weaknesses, and we are not the only nation on earth which have weaknesses. And sometimes these weaknesses are paramount and are so prominent that they can influence the balance and polarize the society and create difficulties that are then very difficult to come and to overcome and to cope with. And this is where we are now. I'm also a great admirer of Ari Shavit. Particularly, I'm an admirer of the opportunity that I occasionally have to disagree with him. Because it's only make you happy when you can disagree with someone that you respect. If you don't respect him, what's the big deal? But I think I agree with Ari Shavit, obviously, on the fears, on the dangers that the polarization can cause to the state of Israel. I'm not certain that I am prepared to pay the price, or that he believes the necessary price, in order to unite with some of the groups which are now trying to become more aggressive and more forthcoming in internal debate in the state of Israel. For me, the Messianic groups, which are now represented by Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, are not partners for anything. They are not partners for cooperation. They are not partners for any future government in the state of Israel. They have to be squeezed into the corner and the sidelines of history where they belong. The state of Israel had different views, and we practiced and exercised democracy for a very long period of time, in spite of the differences, in spite of the different factions, which were from the extreme right to the extreme left. But the mainstream, the core of the Israeli society, was based on the belief in human values, in equality, in democracy, in human respect for others, and in peace with our enemies, and not in an internal war with our enemies. And now, while Ari Shavit shares with me all of these principles, he may fool himself if he thinks that we can somehow unite with some of the groups that do not believe in these principles and are not in support of these principles. So I'm absolutely aware of the fears, the problems, the dangers, the challenges to the state, to the stability and the democracy of the state of Israel. And I'm prepared to fight against these and not to close my eyes and call them brothers. They are not my brothers.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. That was a very fruitful and insightful discussion. I hope we'll move forward towards peace, and I wish you a great day.
All right. Thank you very much.